All right. The YouTube side, I've just got that going, I think. This is looking better.
All right.
People in YouTube chat, so that's good. Come on, Lee. Oh, we're live on YouTube. I can see myself. Hello, YouTube. I should probably, yeah, we should probably fill the air whilst we wait for Lee then.
Mm-hmm.
So welcome into the pre-staging area for our webinar. We'll get started in just a moment, waiting for one of our colleagues to join us. We're going to be taking your questions today. And I need to mute my own microphone. Otherwise, you'll hear double Alex, which nobody needs to hear. We've got on the line today, we've got Jay, who is one of our SEs. Hello, Jay.
Hello. Yeah, and we've also got Lee here from the solutions engineering team. So there's two of us ready to go.
Okay.
Hello, folks. I have finally made it to my own event. It is always good to be fashionably late, isn't it? Right? Thank you for bearing with us while we had a few technical issues there. I see people joining us, so I am going to share. I'm also going to wait just a few minutes to allow people to join us while we work our way through these technical issues. Welcome to our monthly SE Office Hours webinar. The purpose of this particular webinar is really an opportunity for you in the community to bring to us questions that you may have about your Tailscale usage or about how you'd like to use Tailscale in the future. So as Alex and Jay have already done, we'll just redo some introductions. Now we have a few attendees in the room. My name is Lee Briggs. I am usually based on the west coast of the US, but right now I am going back to the source of my accent and I am in the UK, visiting family and planning for a big event in the future. So thank you everybody for joining us. Jay, I would love you to do a quick introduction of yourself.
Yeah, my name is Jay Stapleton. I've been SE at Tailscale now for about a year and a half and been with the company for coming up on 3 years now. I'm joining from Windsor, Ontario in Canada, and happy to be here. This is my first time doing one of these events, so happy to join. And Alex.
Yeah, and the only person actually in America in the room is me, apparently. So hello, I'm Alex. I'm joining you from North Carolina today. I am head of developer relations here at Tailscale. I also make a bunch of YouTube videos, which hopefully some of you have watched. So yeah, fire off your questions. Let us know. And I think Lee's got some housekeeping rules to take us through now.
I certainly do, yes. Thank you, Alex. So just general housekeeping rules that we like to abide by on all of our Tailscale webinars. Please be respectful. There is a chat box that you can interact with us and interact with the rest of the people. You can see that here. Please feel free to let us know where you are joining us from in the chat box. We love to know how global Tailscale is, but in that chat box, please be respectful. We are donating our time here, and lots of people are joining from different backgrounds, so make sure that you use a respectful language. As always, this is a live webinar with live demos, so if I get a wild hair to just suddenly start doing a demo of something that we talk about, please be patient. I'm at the behest of the demo gods. We're doing this live. We try to keep this casual, so things may go wrong, and that your patience is always appreciated. And then finally, as we already mentioned, this webinar is really designed for you to ask questions. So we're going to do our best to answer them. We're human beings. We may not have the answer at our disposal right away, but we've got a wealth of knowledge around Tailscale in the room here. But when you do ask questions, if you are watching from YouTube, Alex will hopefully be able to pick those up in the YouTube chat and will relay them to us. If you are joining us via the Zoom console, there is a Q&A section in Zoom, although I don't see that right now. Oh, there it is. It's under the More section. So you'll see a Q&A box under the More tab under Zoom. Please feel free to please ask your questions in the Q&A section because that is easier for us to be able to track which questions we've answered and which questions we haven't. This webinar is designed for you. If we don't get any questions, we're going to close it down early, and I'm going to go to the pub around the corner. So I think what we'd really like to see is you folks to bring us questions that you may have about your Tailscale usage, or tell us a little bit about your Tailscale usage. And, Alex and Jay and I will ad-lib a little bit until we get some of those questions. And if we don't get any, I'm going to go and have a beer. So I would leave it all to you folks in the room here to kind of send us as tricky question as you can. While we're waiting for those questions, I'm going to kind of ask Jay and Alex what they have going on right now. It looks like, Alex, you have a question on YouTube.
We have 3 already. Yeah, the YouTube
Excellent.
folks are here for it. So I'll just drop in a little sprinkling of what we've been up to and do the pitter patter before we get to it.
Absolutely.
Just released part 2 of the infrastructure as code video series. So Lee, this is an area I know that's close to your heart, talking about Terraform and automation and infrastructure as code type stuff. So if anybody watching is in the DevOps space and you're doing anything with Terraform and Tailscale, and in this case DigitalOcean, but of course it transposes to any of the cloud providers, check out the YouTube channel. Literally just dropped about 20 minutes ago. Brand new video for you. So
excellent. Looking forward to watching it.
Our first question comes in from Avery on YouTube. He says, is there a plan to make Tailscale IPs/DNS work when the internet is down?
I think I will jump in here unless Jay fancies to, take over. I think if we think about how DNS generally works, the internet is obviously some sort of connectivity to your DNS server is required, right? So in order for you to resolve that DNS, you send a UDP packet to the DNS server, and the DNS server responds over that network connection. I'm going to kind of take a leap of faith here and assume that what we really want to be able to do here is resolve DNS to other Tailscale clients that are on kind of the local network that you are on without having that internet connection. Because Tailscale, in theory, if the endpoints for the two clients that are communicating with each other are on the same local area network, they should still be able to connect to each other, assuming that those endpoints have a direct routable address. However, DNS will not work because DNS is resolved by 100.100.100.100 within Tailscale, and that requires a connection to our control plane. I don't think we have any plans to fix that because internet connectivity is sort of assumed. You need to be able to discover clients over Tailscale via our stun mechanisms, via our kind of adequately and intricately named derp servers. So I don't think we have any plans for that. But I think, if there is a designed path or mechanism that you would like here, Abby, we would love to hear it. Like, what would you like this to do in those circumstances where the internet is down? Hopefully that answers your question. Jay, Alex, do you have any additional things you want to add here?
No, I think that sums up what I would have approached there.
I think it's worth noting that each Tailscale client runs its own local DNS server. So when Tailscale pushes things down, when you connect a client, it pushes that DNS, the routes. We've all seen the -- accept routes option if we're a Linux user. What it's doing essentially is publishing the route table along with some DNS information, and it runs a local DNS server on each client, which includes your phone, by the way. So you'll survive small blips in connectivity if it's a local connection. There might be some, sessions already established, that kind of thing. But if it's a completely fresh lookup, as Lee says, the authoritative DNS server will be the Tailscale one that's running in the cloud in our control plane. So kind of mostly no is the answer, but you might get lucky.
I think something that just came to mind when you just talked there, Alex, was like within Tailscale, you can add DNS servers that you can then do much more intricate things with. So within the Tailscale web console, there's a DNS panel there. There's absolutely nothing stopping you kind of implementing something like DNS mask on every host and then having an upstream resolver of the Tailscale DNS resolver. And in that particular situation, you'll have much better DNS resolution capabilities. And DNS mask can be set up to have local caches when it can't reach the internet. So, if you set an upstream resolver of the Tailscale address from DNS mask, which would be able to reach because it has Tailscale there, and then cache a bunch of results, it would likely work. But I don't think that's the kind of in the spirit of the question. But in our solutions engineering mind, we try and come up with all kinds of wacky and crazy solutions to these problems. So yeah, hopefully that answers the question. Great question, by the way. We have a couple of Q&A questions through on Zoom. Alex, do we want to do this in chronological order and go through the YouTube ones first? I think that's probably fairest.
Yeah, I think there's 2 or 3 questions it looks like related to tail drive specifically. So let's try and cover all those off all at once if we can. So we've got Dave from Denver, Colorado, who writes, do you have any updates on the new tail drive feature? And Justin writes, I've been trying tail drive today and I want to know, can you share access to your tail drive with other tailnet devices like you can share machines with other tailnets? So it sounds like just lots of tail drive questions. I will preface everything we're about to say by saying tail drive's still in alpha, folks. So it's a lot of this is subject to change, but gents?
Yeah, my understanding.
Sorry, go ahead, Jay. I was going to say I haven't actually used tail drive myself, so I'm hopeful that Jay has got better answers here. So go ahead.
I've been playing around with it actually. That's one of the features that I've been really excited for because I use tail drop a fair bit, and I have since I started using Tailscale. But I also have a lot of tagged nodes in my lab environment, and tail drop, of course, only works between nodes that are signed in as the same user. So tail drive has been really great for that. I believe as of now, you cannot share a tail drive share with a separate tailnet. I don't know if there's any plans, Justin, to change that. I expect our security team would have a very close and very deep look into the ramifications of that before we flip that switch. But the tail drive itself spins up a WebDAV server. As many of you have probably encountered, if you're doing any sort of file sharing over a VPN of any sort or any sort of encapsulating tunnel, the default that a lot of people go to is CIFS or Samba, the Windows file share, because it's ubiquitous, it's everywhere. But it is something that was really designed for those local links, and anything with very high latency compared to being on the same LAN slows down these Samba transfers quite quickly, slows them down quickly. You know what I mean. And as the latency increases, the rate at which it slows down increases quadratically. So it is not a super efficient way of transferring a lot of files if you're introducing latency into the network. So WebDAV is a more modern protocol. It's designed for to be more forgiving of network topologies, and on any VPN type service or any remote access service, it's going to give you better performance.
Well, I'm going to add on to that as well. We got an exciting update about some changes in the unstable branch of Tailscale yesterday that our wonderful and talented performance team have implemented changes in Tailscale SSH tail drop. And we haven't actually tested tail drive, but I think the internal suspicion is this will affect tail drive that makes Tailscale SSH tail drop and tail drive twice as fast as the standard OpenSSH implementation. So we're excited to see how that affects the usage of these particular things. That's just landed in our unstable branch. So we're hopeful that that is going to solve a lot of performance problems in this area. Just to Alex's point, Tail drive is in alpha. Some enterprising Reddit users discovered this feature, and it has propagated around the Tailscale community. So we hope you're enjoying it. There are no guarantees around performance or feature parity at the moment.
You got to love it when the community finds features before they're ready to be released, huh? So
that's the beauty of open source. That's the beauty of open source,
yes,
Alex. You can't hide anything.
All right, let's jump to a question on the Zoom side of things for a moment. We've got a question here from Corey, who wants to know I'm curious if they do anything with WireGuard's pre-shared key. There's some cool stuff they could do with it, like allow the user to set pre-shared keys as an argument on the client, which would protect their network in the event of their Tailscale account being compromised. Or perhaps they could do some sort of post-quantum key exchange, whatever that means, with the coordination server to generate the pre-shared keys.
Jay, you want to take this, or you want me to have a crack?
Uh, I can talk at a fairly high level here. So part of what Tailscale brings to WireGuard, because we use WireGuard under the hood, is the key management. And the key exchange is quite dynamic and can be refreshed fairly frequently during your connections and transparently to you. That's part of the Tailscale magic. I have manually set up a lot of WireGuard configurations, and the pre-sharing keys is one of those things that doesn't necessarily scale really well once you start adding, hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of nodes. So I don't expect we're going to have a way of manually making any changes to how key management happens. Lee, you might be aware of some conversations that I'm not.
No, I think one of the things that we generally talk about with customers is the migration from pre-shared keys. I think one of the misnomers that I've certainly heard from folks who are adopting Tailscale is that the pre-shared keys are then generated on behalf of the user, and we don't actually use pre-shared keys in Tailscale at all. They're all node keys, and they're all in like coordinated via a coordination server. Pre-shared keys are obviously inherently difficult because they are a piece of entropy that you then have to change between all the nodes. I'm personally interested in the ideas around quantum key exchange. I've got a very high level understanding of what that looks like, but I don't think we have any plans in scope for changing how we manage keys on the Tailscale side. It's really worth remembering that one of the values of having node keys is that when you revoke a key from a node, like let's say you offboard a user in SSO, or somebody loses a laptop, you can very quickly expire that key via the control server. The next time it tries to connect, you say nope, not allowed. With pre-shared keys, that's really, really difficult. So yeah, hopefully that helps you there, Corey. Looks like there's an answer here just for those who don't get the chat that Corey said. Thank you for the answer. I thought as much about the scaling issue. A friend brought it up. I just wasn't sure. I just wasn't sure. Also, hi, Alex. I'm in the Raleigh area as well.
Oh, that's
Great
awesome.
opportunity for me and Alex to talk about our plans in October. I think
Yeah.
that's as good a time as any, right? So I'll be visiting the Raleigh-Durham area at the end of October for All Things Open, which is in the Raleigh area. I think Alex and I have talks at All Things Open. So if you are in the area, Corey, and you haven't planned to attend All Things Open, I think we'd love to see you. And if not, maybe we should do like one of the evenings, Alex. We should do like a social event, Tailscale meetup in the evening. I think that would be cool.
Yeah, we did one last year at Trophy Brewing, and it was really good actually. So we might do the similar thing this year. Just watch this space and
Our field marketing team is listening in here, so I hope they're
yes.
also already getting the budget approved for our social events. Awesome. We're getting questions through thick and fast here, so let's
We
try
are,
and move
yes.
on to one from Chris. So Chris says we had a client using Tailscale. The internet dropped, was offline for about 30 minutes. Once the internet was restored, we logged into the client's computer. So we did have internet connection. We could see the map drive letters, could see the folders in the NAS, but could not open individual files. Do we know why? I think I have an idea about the problem here. Jay, do you have an idea? Do you want to take this, or do you want me to take it?
Why don't you start and we'll see if we have the same idea.
Yes. Okay. I love this. This is a great idea. Okay. So when Tailscale is activated on a computer, there is an underlying mechanism which decides whether you are going to be able to connect to another device on the network. And that is our underlying magic sock capability, which basically watches for any packets going out through the Tailscale interface. And if it doesn't see any packets going out through the interface, in order to do a bunch of things around battery usage and battery life and general good practice around software, we actually dial down that interface. if there's no packets going out there. Now, if the internet goes down, obviously there's no packets going out to other devices on the Tailscale network. However, the local like drive mechanism, depending on what it is, I'm assuming it's probably Samba if it's a map drive, probably had a bunch of cached references in there. Samba's a particularly inefficient protocol if the network goes down, right? It doesn't actually deal with these things very well. So what I'm suspecting is happening here is that when you try and open those individual files, the Samba like mechanism didn't have an active connection, and Tailscale also didn't have an active connection, so it just basically didn't send any packets. The quickest and easiest way to fix this is just start and stop Tailscale. That will almost always fix this problem. In traditional IT, usage terms, you just turn it off and turn it back on again, and everything will work magically. There is a lot of planned work in this space on the Tailscale client side to improve the way that we handle this kind of deprogramming of network connections. So I expect to see lots of improvements over here over the next few years or whatever. But ultimately, Tailscale does its very best to remove any doubt about how it's working. And so in these situations where the internet goes down or it tries to make your life a little bit easier, it's going to sometimes have these little issues with some of these protocols like Samba. Hopefully that answers your question, Chris. If you see this issue again, our support team is wonderful. You can run a bug report. So you just type Tailscale bug report, which generates a bug report locally, which we can then look at on our back end, send it over to our support team. I'm sure they would be happy to take a further and deeper look. These bug reports really help us with trying to figure out the root cause of the problem. All we can do is really speculate based on our knowledge of how things work. So if you see that happen again, Chris, just run a bug report. We'd love to be able to dig in deeper. Jay, you want to keep me honest there? That's my understanding of it, but do you think there's anything that I could have got wrong there, Alex?
No, I think you were probably a little more thorough than I would have just stuck to we probably have a cache.
Yes. Yes. We almost certainly have a cache. Well,
Yeah.
I think Samba actually has the cache. We
Right.
just don't know about the Samba cache because we don't send any packets out over the interface, right? So
Yeah.
that's more than likely what it is. Okay, should we go to a YouTube question, Alex?
Absolutely. They are coming in thick and fast. So, QED writes, I'm running a funnel and receive an error regarding port 80 when the public connection is via HTTPS. What gives? Where's that coming from?
So the no rules matched error means that it's probably an ACL issue. So the funnel adds allowed IPs to the Tailscale interface. If you're familiar with WireGuard, that's one of the sort of fundamental ways which we route traffic. I expect you would need to add a rule in your ACLs. If you add the ** rule temporarily and this problem goes away, that's probably the right way to approach that. Lee, anything that you've run into there?
Well, I'm reading the question and I'm like, port 80 and HTTPS. Well, port 80 is HTTP and the connection is HTTPS. Don't they just need to open port 443? That's my guess, right? Funnel only works over HTTPS, right?
Right.
So I imagine there's probably no port 443 in the ACL, which is probably why they can't access it. But Funnel is a public connection. I think we need to know a little bit more about what this configuration looks like.
QED is happy with the answers so far. So if you want to let us know a QED or follow-up, a bit more information, we'll probably come back to you a bit later on. Now, in the meantime, Andreas writes on the Zoom side, hi, a question from Germany. How can a whole network access Tailscale? That includes devices that don't support it, like a Roku smart TV. I'm basically asking for something like a subnet router, but in reverse.
Yeah.
Yes, let me answer this one if that's okay.
All right.
I've just done this for AWS site-to-site VPN, and there's a lot of considerations here. Okay, so with a subnet router, you advertise the local area network address space. However, what you want to do, by the sounds of things, is you want to actually advertise the entire Tailscale address space to a bunch of devices that don't have Tailscale on it. The only way to do this is that you have to set up on your home network or the network that you have control over a route into Tailscale. So what you do here is you create a Tailscale device that has access to the Tailscale, like on your local area network that has access to the Tailscale network. And then within your local network, if you have a router or a switch or something else that's managing your routing mechanism that has the capability of managing access to different things that kind of would work via DHCP and has all the route tables sent over there. If you add a route to the CG NAT, the carrier grade NAT space to a Tailscale device, it will likely just work. However, there's a big caveat here. You can't just use a standard home router to do this because they generally won't let you add manual routes to your network. So if you have a more advanced network router or like home router, like something that's like OpenWRT or Unify stuff is what I do this with, that will give you a lot more flexibility. And all you're really missing is a route on the actual on the network level itself that routes into the CG NAT space. A Roku Smart TV is a great example here because you can't update the routes on a Roku Smart TV unless you want to jailbreak it because it's Android under the hood. Ask me how I know. And you can add a route manually that way, but ultimately you'll need to be able to do this on your local kind of network. So there's a really big caveat to think about here, and that is anything that you route to that Tailscale device. So let's say you have a Tailscale device on 192.168.1.200, and then you add a route on your network for the entire network that's like 192.168.1 into the CG NAT space. Everything that's behind that network will now have the same capabilities as the device that you're routing through. So if there's anything on your network you don't trust and you don't want to get into Tailscale, do not do this. It is a very, very big security hole, and it's something that you should do with only real consideration. Jay, Alex, anything that anybody needs to add here?
That was a great answer. Yeah. I've put a link in the chat for you. One of our awesome community and listeners of my podcast, actually, a chap called Matt Knight, wrote up a excellent blog post on how to do this using one of those Slate routers that runs OpenWRT. Essentially, the Roku device receives via DHCP the correct routing tables. And as Lee was saying, it then can reach out. The downside of that is, of course, that anything else in that subnet, in that CIDR that gets that route can now also reach out as well. So yeah, here be dragons on that one.
And also with, I believe it started in 1.68, you would have to probably disable the stateful filtering, which is a newer feature added to secure that type of connection.
Okay, YouTube question next. We've got two here from Ben Smith, but the second one's way more interesting, so I'm going to skip. There's one about mounting the Tailscale, I think, tail drive on reboot, which I imagine is just...
I have an answer for that question.
Okay, well, let me read it out then. How would I do Tailscale mounting on reboot if the F-test tab doesn't work due to Tailscale not being available on reboot? I had to make a bespoke systemd service.
Yeah, so ultimately you need to use the Linux run levels here to be able to make this work. And I haven't done this specifically, but my tried and tested time as a Linux administrator means that I'm probably going to try this now. But ultimately, when Linux boots, it has these different run levels where different things kick in. Like the network level comes up. If you add Tailscale at the network run level, then that happens before fstab. And so ultimately what you need to be able to do here is start the Tailscale systemd service before fstab runs. So you need to look into Linux run levels. Systemd makes this a little bit more complicated. And so you can do things like, I don't know how fstab generally works in terms of systemd anymore, because I think systemd made everything a little bit cloudy for me. I think you can do things like with systemd, like requires other systemd units to work. But if you want to be able to do it in fstab, you just need to make sure that Tailscale gets booted with a run level script at like 2 or 3 rather than after the network comes up. Because the way that Linux boots, and somebody will have a much closer kind of level here. But ultimately the thing that happens is like it's single user mode and then a bunch of other stuff, and then the network comes up and then FSTab runs and user space kicks in. So that's the way to do this. I would look at that as a solution. If I get some time, I might look at this myself.
Good deal. Well, the second question, I'm going to throw this in sort of Jay's direction, I think. The second part of the question is, what's the best way to create isolated subnets? It would be amazing if you could create multiple tailnets under a single organization. I find ACLs a bit intimidating as there is no GUI.
Yeah. The ACLs can definitely be intimidating. Once you get the hang of it, they are incredibly powerful. And I'll preface this by saying today, the way to approach that will be to remove that allow all rule that Tailscale ships with. That's really useful for testing, but terrifying in production. So let's pull that rule out. And then as you rebuild the rules allowing access, you can create what looks more like VLANs. So, for instance, you can have a set of tags that have permission to communicate with a second set of tags. But because our rules are denied by default, you can also have a set of tags that isn't allowed to talk to the rest of your network. And doing that within the ACLs is the current best practice for that. What you should also look out for in, say, end of October, if everything goes really well, is a way of creating a second sort of isolated tailnet. And I don't know if I'm supposed to be talking about this yet, but
No,
it's
Jay,
gonna be
this is the
coming.
exact sort of format where we're going to start
Yeah,
revealing these new features. Let's just talk about it. I was
yeah.
going to talk about it, so
All right. So for the few of you who are tuned in, you get a sneak preview that we will be giving you the option to create independent tailnets. And this has been great for me as I get to preview our features often well ahead of when the alpha testers get them, because I have my lab tailnet, which I use to test out scenarios, and I am constantly breaking it because that's what it's for. I also have my home tailnet, which runs my image server, which runs my Caliber server, which runs, your Jellyfin and all the other tools that you modern nerd needs to have a rich and happy digital life. What I didn't like is every time I'm reproducing a problem for a customer, it breaks all of my services. So being able to flip between my lab tailnet, which I can break all the time, and my home tailnet, which I get yelled at if the kids can't watch their videos, having that separation has been really great. So I'm really looking forward to this coming out in a public beta this fall. And this is one of those features that we've been discussing internally since I joined the company. So it's been a long time coming.
Who needs Down Detector if Paw Patrol doesn't stream? Huh?
I mean, I certainly know when Roblox is down before anybody else
Yeah,
because
exactly.
I get a frustrated request from my family. So yeah,
We're all tech support, aren't we?
oh,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
Now I'm going to jump back to another Zoom question here. This one comes from Chris Anderson. Thanks for all the questions, Chris, by the way. This is his question around sort of technical support. Is there any way to guarantee a faster response? Like what SLAs do you guys offer and your support tiers?
Jay, you were on the support team. I think you're as best placed. Previously on the support team, I think you're best placed to answer this.
Yeah, what we've done recently, Tailscale has gone through quite a significant growth spurt in the last several months, and we are in the process of building out our support team, and we're hiring into that team as well as the solutions engineering team. I see a couple of familiar names have gone by so far, but for our enterprise customers and our commercial customers, they've gotten sort of priority as this load has increased. So as we ramp up our headcount on the support team, I expect that to get a lot better. Certainly, we don't want to be taking a week, even for our free users, to get back to people. But I also really recommend that people post in our subreddit, which is great. We have some users in our subreddit. I have tried to convince them to come work for us because they're so quick and so thorough with their answers consistently that it's a really good resource. And also, if you tag us on a Fediverse and Mastodon, there's a lot of us on there who keep our eyeballs over there throughout the company, not just within the support team. So the answer might be that you have to contact support, but it might be, oh, this is something I've seen before. Here's a doc to get you started, or here's a way of changing that configuration so you're not going to run into that problem.
Good deal. Okay.
Yeah,
KDog
I
devs.
just posted.
Oh,
Sorry, I just posted in the chat. If you are listening into this and you love Tailscale and you want to work with us, we are hiring for both our solutions engineering team and our support team. So we would love to have some of you talented folks on the team as well. So if either of those roles interest you, please feel free to reach out to us.
Good deal. Thanks for that, Lee. Okay, KDog Devs writes on YouTube. We've got maybe 7 or 8 questions to get to on YouTube, so let's try and be fairly brief with these answers if we can. Will dynamic location-based auto exit nodes be implemented at any point? And will there be exit node failover as well if one goes down? It auto routes through the next one possible, maybe?
Yes. Next question. No,
Yes,
just
this is coming. Yes, this is coming. Yes, this is part of the
too
roadmap.
brief.
Yeah.
But yes, it's on the roadmap and exactly what you described there. I don't have a timeline on that, but it is being actively developed.
Good deal. All right. Well, we will keep an eye on that, and when that's released, KDog, we'll make sure we mention it in an office hours or make a video about it or something just for you. Now, Justin writes in again on YouTube. I like the way that TailDrive makes the files look like they're just in a shared folder. I understand the same thing can be done with other products. I figured fewer layers for the problems, the better. That wasn't really a question, was it? So I'll move on
That's just
to
a very nice comment. So
yes,
yeah,
indeed.
we'll take
Thank
it.
you.
Yeah.
I'll move on to Raymond's question, which is about certbots. So I found out how to get HTTPS with my own domain. Just 3 commands on the Ubuntu command line. Apt install certbot. Again, that's not a question. That's just a how to do something. Thanks.
I love it. Yeah, keep them
Thanks,
coming.
Raymond.
Keep them coming.
Awesome. See what I mean? We have a great community. So when Jay was talking about getting support through the subreddit a few minutes ago, I was over here nodding furiously because it's an awesome resource. So we love our community. Thank you so much for showing up. 050490V. Thanks for that username, by the way. Do I have to have client installed on all my devices in my network in order to have connectivity with my local network?
So that is what our subnet router can do. The subnet router can act as a bridge between your Tailscale network and the LAN of the device that it's installed on. And the subnet router is the same agent that you would install normally, just going into a different mode where it acts as that bridge. So if you have, an IP printer or an IP camera that you want to be able to access from Tailscale, you can do that by advertising the subnet through a subnet router.
Good deal. Right, we'll jump back to Zoom for a second. Again, this is another question from Corey. Thank you so much for all your questions today, Corey. Is there any documentation for running Ansible playbooks through Tailscale SSH? The idea is that I want to run all of my machines and manage them only via the tailnet.
Yes, I mean, ultimately, the solution here is to use the host name that is associated with Tailscale, which is only resolvable on the Tailscale network. Then if you advertise the SSH capability on the Tailscale client, there is a Tailscale SSH command, which I think in Linux and all that kind of stuff you need to use. Ansible just shells out to, or like Python's out to the SSH command. So if you alias Tailscale SSH to SSH, it will just work. I think that's a great YouTube video, though, Alex. I would be happy to collaborate with you on the content for that.
I'm glad you threw me that one because in probably about 10 days, 2 weeks time, something like that, we have an Ansible SSH video coming out specifically. I'm going to put in the YouTube chat a link to the GitHub repo though, because all the code I'm going to use in that video is already public. So if you already know Ansible, you can go through and go spelunking through that repo and find the bit that you need. As Lee was saying, it's just a case of putting the correct host name, the Tailscale host name, in your Ansible inventory file. You might need to set your Ansible Python interpreter as well, depending on the target host. Although I didn't run into that issue on an Ubuntu host, admittedly, only on a Nix host. So yeah, it's just straightforward. Just set the correct thing in your host file, and SSH will transparently pick up the fact that it's going over Tailscale, and jobs are good. And as we say in England,
Jobs are good indeed.
right. Back to YouTube questions. This one is from Skyworld. Can ports from Docker containers with Tailscale attached also be attached from the host and devices not connected to the tailnet? So this is building on some of the work I think that we've released earlier this year. We've done a couple of videos on Docker specifically. So what happens when you publish two containers is you're effectively creating two Linux kernel networking namespaces for those containers. In your Docker Compose file, when you pass the network mode service with the, merge them together effectively, you're merging those two Linux container namespaces, kernel namespaces, you're merging those two namespaces together. So essentially, those two containers that would have had two separate sets of interfaces now present as only having one. Now, you will not be able to set a port mapping on the container that you are. So like it's a parent-child relationship. It's a bit hard to explain in the ether. I think I do a better job of explaining it in the blog post and the video, which we'll link somewhere in this chat. Essentially, though, the answer is yes, you can expose ports, but you'll only be exposing it on one of the container's definitions, if that makes sense. So let's say you're exposing an Nginx container. You could do that on port 80 on the Tailscale container itself, because that becomes the parent container, and also have it on the tailnet as well. So the answer is yes, but it requires a little bit of finagling to get going and just to understand, really. But the answer is yes.
All right.
Okay, I didn't mean to answer my own question, but that's
No,
how it goes.
absolutely. That's why we're here. We're all experts here, right?
All right, Jason Tech SF asks again on YouTube, how good is Tailscale at bypassing the Great Firewall of China? I've heard many VPNs don't work in China when Americans try to access some online resources, including different websites.
Yeah, I've done a little bit of work in this area, so I will take this one. The answer to this question is ultimately that we need to think about how the Great Firewall of China allegedly works, and that is ultimately it basically outbound restricts any access to certain IPs, ports, and protocols based on the kind of like the egress of the traffic. So if you have a VPN service that's very widely used, the Great Firewall will ultimately recognize that a lot of traffic is going out over a certain port and then just start blocking it. Tailscale works around that by default using its relay servers. So we are always within, it's always very possible that we will be blocked from the Great Firewall of China at any moment by restricting access to all of our relay servers. What's unique about Tailscale is the geographic distribution of relay servers. So if a local relay server is down, then it will just use another one. So the Great Firewall of China would have to restrict all of those derp servers. You can also get around this by implementing your own derp server, which is definitely an advanced level thing. It's not easy to do. It's a very complicated protocol. I'm not recommending that anybody do this as a hobbyist thing. But ultimately, if all the relay servers blocked by the Great Firewall of China, and you have a organizational need to be able to do this, it's definitely possible to make it work. So yeah, I think hopefully that answers that question. Anybody got any additional thoughts they want to add?
Not especially. I do find very we tend not to lean too much into the geo relocation stuff, because for the most part it's used for nefarious purposes, and that's really not what we're here for. I won't get too much further into it, but the reality is you can use networking to do things that perhaps people don't want you to do if you try hard enough. So the dots are there. It's up to you to connect them, really, is how I would leave that. So
Please.
Ishura writes on the Zoom question, does Tailscale SSH work with X11 forwarding? Wow, that's going back a bit. I haven't done any X11 forwarding in years with something like X2Go, I think I used to use when I was in college to try and do remote terminals. I can't load the GUI of my application with Tailscale SSH. I keep getting X11 forwarding request failed on channel 0, but I can load the GUI with normal SSH.
So I've
It definitely
actually
works.
done this.
Yeah, it definitely works.
Yeah. I'm not sure what you're running into there, but I have done X11 forwarding on SSH, not because I needed to, but because it seemed like a really nerdy thing to do. So I wanted to try it out when I was new to the company, and I did have an X application running on a cloud service and the GUI locally. So yeah, we would have to get more specific about your configuration to see what you're running into. If it helps, I was running stock Ubuntu on both ends of the connection. Your mileage may vary on different distributions as far as how they handle that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, you can add -VVV to the SSH connection, which will give you a whole bunch of information about what's failing on the remote end. But it definitely works. This is likely more a configuration question than a Tailscale question. I think there's probably something that's missing from your SSH config, either on the remote server or on the local server, but it definitely works. I know that's not super helpful. I don't know if there's anything that we can do without more information, but don't be discouraged. It definitely does work.
Absolutely. Yeah, so we can all take a trip down memory lane as well. X11
Yes.
forwarding. Love it. Great question.
I'd love to ask get to this question from Jason around Tailscale on routers because it is something that's close to my heart. So the question is, can Tailscale be installed on routers? I would assume open source router firmware like OpenWRT can have Tailscale installed onto it.
Yes. Next question.
Yes. Well, no, just very quickly. Tailscale is built in Go. If your router can run a Go binary in its required architecture, you need to make sure you check the chipset architecture. Just download the Tailscale package, and it will just work. I run it on my Unify router. It's great.
I'm a big fan of doing it on the router as well. I have OpenSense at my house here and at my parents' house too, so I'm able to set up Tailscale tunnels between the two for remote ZFS backups that way, and it works really, really well. And the really nice thing about running it on the firewall itself is that if you turn that device into a subnet router, then suddenly you've literally got, god tier access to the network. So here be dragons, of course, from a security perspective, but it's darn handy. Like for example, I bought my mother-in-law some smart switches that run Tasmotor, which is an open source firmware that goes onto some smart plugs, and they present a very small web server, but not capable of running Tailscale natively. But I wanted to have them in my Home Assistant back here in Raleigh, for example. Don't ask me why. It's just the easiest way I thought I could do it. And so I've got a couple of devices controlled from Home Assistant in Raleigh over Tailscale through an OpenSense subnet router running in Norfolk in England to control some lights in my mother-in-law's house. Yeah,
Well, there you
it's a
go. That's
proper
the
jank, but it
ultimate,
works.
the ultimate over-engineered
Right.
solution, but it works.
It
Yeah.
works exactly. Yep.
So what we're
We got a great
saying,
question.
yeah, what we're
Go ahead,
saying
Jake.
is if you do intend on applying to the open positions in our engineering support or solutions team, you will be working with people who are too nerdy for their own good.
I
Thanks,
think
Jay.
for the next Ask an SE webinar, the people that are hosting need to come with their most over-engineered Tailscale implementation. Alex has just submitted his attempt, and now we have to one up Alex.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, we got a great question here from DJ Baziwazi, great name. I'm desperately searching for a way to do some sort of Wake on LAN feature through my tailnet, but I can't get it working. I have an answer to this, but I want to give everybody else a chance to answer if there's other thoughts they want to add
If you
here.
know it, go for it.
Wacom LAN is a layer 2 implementation. So you need local MAC addresses, or you need at least layer 2 connectivity. You can do Wacom LAN over layer 3. Tailscale operates at layer 3. This is going to be really hard to do. My recommendation is, instead of investing in doing Wacom LAN via Tailscale, is to add something like a Raspberry Pi into your network that runs Tailscale, that will give you the ability to send magic packets or the UDP datagrams from that device via Tailscale. That is a much easier solution. You can get very, very small devices that will run on your network, that will be on the local area network. So like layer 2 connectivity, MAC address level connectivity. That's a much better way of doing this. I think you're going to have a really, really hard time doing this over layer 3. It is possible. It is a miserable experience. Ask me how I know. Hopefully it answers your question, DJ Bazzy Wazzy. I just wanted to say the name again. It's great.
Plus point, if you're putting a Raspberry Pi in that remote network, you could always, step up a level and do a Pi KVM and then use that to do
Yeah,
double duty, because Pi KVM has Wake on LAN built into the web interface.
Mhm.
So
that's the best way to do it.
yeah. In fact, we literally, the podcast network I do in the evenings, we're just deploying an offsite server near Toronto in the next few weeks. And I screwed a Raspberry Pi into the back of it with Pi KVM, which is doing exactly that, because we're putting the Raspberry Pi into the management VLAN, and then the server itself is in like it's not quite a DMZ, but it's a bit closer to a DMZ than I'm comfortable with having an IPMI situation in. So yeah, if you can get a proper Linux box in there, a Pi is just an example. It could be one of those small little Dell 1 liter PCs or something. If you can get a proper Linux box in there, you can solve a lot of problems. But as Lee says, it's over layer 2, which, yeah, you're going to have a tough time doing that over Tailscale, unfortunately.
I've just found a question that we got at 7:15 UK time, and I want to come back to it. It's from Donald LaForce on YouTube. I'm hoping to find out if there's a resolution to this issue on the roadmap. Better interop with other users of the CG NAT space 106400/10. It's currently a locker for adoption in our organization. As a cybersecurity company, we use CG NAT ranges internally to test resources. Jay, I think you've been running into this recently, so for probably our last question, I'm going to see if you want to answer that.
Yeah, sure thing. So there's a couple of things that we've done already. We have a newer feature called IP sets, and no, sorry, IP pools. We also have a new feature called IP sets, but that's not what I was thinking of. IP pools lets you use a subset of the /10 CGNet IP range for your tailnet. What we still need to do is for Mac OS specifically, we route the whole /10 because Mac OS is very sensitive to changes in the routing table. So as machines come and go, you rewrite the routing table, and specifically Chrome on Mac OS will see that the network has changed and reload all your pages. And people don't like that. So currently on Mac OS, we default to a single route for the /10. In order to use this IP pools, you would also have to set the 1CGNAT rule as false in your policy file, which goes back to having individual /32 routes for every machine on your tailnet, which if you have 10, 15 machines, that's fine. If they're relatively static, that's fine, but it's still going to cause some friction on Mac OS if your machines change frequently. So in the future, we are looking at basically routing to the same size of subnet with the default route on Mac OS that we are using in IP pools, but that is not currently implemented.
I think sadly, with a few questions left, that exhausts our time. So if there are any open questions on YouTube, we will try and get round to those answers via the YouTube chat afterwards. This has been a great experience. I don't know if anybody else has had such a good time, but really love these awesome questions. We managed to fill an hour very easily, so appreciate everybody's great questions and sticking around and watching us as we ad lib for a little while at the beginning.
We just didn't want to let you go to the pub, Lee. That's what it is.
I mean, I might have to go now.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll do
Yeah.
the next one from a pub, and we'll
Oh, yeah.
see how badly that goes. See how quickly I can get myself fired.
Well, it'd be
Yeah, I
entertaining
really appreciate
from here.
Absolutely, yeah. As again, really appreciate everybody's time. Thanks for Jay for joining us as a special guest, and Alex for his excellent compare work as usual.
Yeah.
See you
Thank
all
you,
again.
everybody.
Thank you for coming.